Hello everyone, welcome to the 182nd episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. This is the second episode about 2024-2026, a look to the future. In this video, I won't focus so much about like the events on 2024-2026, just look back at the previous video. In this video, it's all about exploring the kind of solutions or mechanisms for enabling humanity to function as a complex system. So if you look at the way that we function inside communities, for instance, these are complex systems, meaning there aren't that many institutions or frames or rules that are very, very limiting, that limit kind of spontaneous human interactions and human activity. But as you scale upwards, you see that humanity is more and more locked or blocked by very heavy and burdensome institutions and rules. And this was by design for a certain period of time because you need to sort of grow into the level of consciousness which enables you to think about global systems that allow for complex interactions. And in order to grow to that point, you kind of need to create these kind of safe boundaries for growing that consciousness. And these include all of the UN, the huge, like the big multinational treaties, the IMF, all these huge bureaucratic, huge institutions that don't allow for the kind of flexibility or coordination at larger scales that you have at lower scales. And so in the previous video, I was talking about one of the first elements, which was to deal with the evolution of money, because obviously the way that money functions today as a debt-based monetary system doesn't allow for, it has certain properties that don't allow for the spontaneous kinds of self-organization or coordination because it is a debt-based system. In a debt-based system, there are certain characteristics, like for instance, the fact that any money in the economy is essentially debt, which needs to be paid a certain period of time, that creates an artificial demand for money from all the people that are indebted, and that create an artificial rhythm for the way that the economy should function, which isn't organic. So basically, because when you're indebted, if you have to repay $1,000 every month on your loan, you cannot decide that, oh, it's winter time, now the economy is slowing down, so I'm just going to pay $300 on my rent, on my debt, not $1,000. Every month, without failing, you have to recapture $1,000 worth of currency. And in order to do that, you need to convince people to buy your stuff, even if they don't need it. And so that's the kind of characteristics, one of the many characteristics that are inherent to a debt-based monetary system, which make it unfit moving further as humanity to function as a global collective organism and as a complex system. Now, the relative theory of money that I presented in the previous video, and I have many other videos presenting that in more detail, its fundamental aim is to mimic the way that your own body distributes energy. So when you start running, energy naturally goes to your legs. When you stop running and you sit down to take a test, the energy naturally divests from going to your legs and goes to your brain. And you don't need to have governments or centralized authority in your body that decides now to tax your legs that have accumulated too much oxygen and are just trying to hold on to that oxygen for dear life and redistribute that energy to your brain, which now needs it most. It's a very organic or spontaneous kind of thing where, it's almost as if your leg cells sort of know that now they don't need that much oxygen, and now your brain knows that it needs more oxygen and just captures it along the way as it circulates in your body. And the relative theory of money, if you look at how the effects that it has on the economy, is that it naturally sort of pulls people towards owning a mean in terms of the relative share of the total monetary mass that each person has. So it equalizes wealth through time without the needs for taxation via its mathematical distribution mechanism, and the principle of relativity. And of course, this is all complex, so you need to look into it. But what's nice is that you can be as rich as you want. You can be a multi-billionaire or a trillionaire in that system. But in order to stay that way, you need to have people feeding you new money continuously, which is a kind of a recognition that whatever service you're providing is still extremely necessary for the body. So it's as if when you're running, it's as if your whole body sort of votes that your legs are the part of your body that deserves, quote unquote, the most amount of energy, because that's what's most important at the time for the collective that is your body. And once that's no longer necessary, then energy sort of divests and goes elsewhere. In our system, it's pretty difficult because the way that the system functions right now is once you're above a certain level of wealth, then you can just let the compounding interest keep you rich for very long, unless you're really, really dumb and you just completely do crap with your money. There are certain needs, for instance, that are at the baseline of humanity for humans that don't scale at the same level as your wealth. So, for instance, you're not going to grow 4 stomachs and eat $10,000 worth of food per day. That's just not physiologically possible. And there have been studies that show that basically above a certain level in terms of salary, the amount that you spend on food is capped. And that cap, it just it permeates into many different other things. Unless you're completely crazy and you want to own 1,000 sports cars, when realistically, obviously, you know that you can drive only one at a time, and so there are people that dilapidate their wealth because they're just insatiable in terms of their needs. But for the most part, once you're above a certain level of wealth, you can just let compounding interest and the fact that you as a human, your needs don't scale at the same rate as your amount of wealth to stay rich forever, basically. Even if whatever service you're providing to society isn't as meaningful or important. Plus, you have all kinds of systems to sort of quote unquote force people to buy your stuff, whether it's insidious marketing, whether it's the fact that in a debt-based monetary system, since the banks, the people that have the most amount of wealth, do have a certain influence on what goods make it into the economy. That is, of course, you have the stories of self-made entrepreneurs that started their business with zero in their pocket. But the most common story is when you start a business, you go first to the bank or to some kind of venture capitalist or some kind of investor, and they're the ones that tell you you're good to go or you're not good to go. And so what happens in the system is sometimes you end up having the choice between Pepsi and Coke. And so is it really a choice at that point? And again, like the characteristics of the debt-based monetary system, the fact that you have to repay the debt at a certain rhythm, all of that sort of artificially creates a way that the system functions that isn't organic or complex. And if you know anything about complex systems, most scientists are telling you that the climate crisis, what's scary about it, is that the climate is a complex system, meaning it's not a linear, easy cause and effect kind of problem. It is like a network of plenty of different systems that are in balance with each other, and when you throw one off its stability, basically, it all adjusts kind of organically. But there is a kind of a point where you don't even know how it's going to react if you push it to a certain degree. And it's almost impossible to calculate. And I'm not that scared of climate change. What I'm scared about is if humanity doesn't function as a complex system, then regardless of what we do from the vantage point of a legacy or an old kind of very rigid system where, the UN SDGs are implemented by these higher, the nation states with all kinds of bureaucracies and paper pushers and tries to do things in that way, we're going to fail. regardless, because we're not functioning as humanity as a complex system on top of the complex systems that we're a part of. And when you have one rigid, very rigid system inside a complex system, it can't work. And so the only way out of resource scarcity, climate change, and all these things is to scale, to make sure that humanity behaves like a complex system and not like a rigid system. And that will allow for decentralized, seemingly chaotic coordination between billions and billions of humans. But it will create a kind of wisdom of the crowd, which is at the planetary scale, that you cannot calculate, but which will have an effect that is much greater than if you pool all these very rigid structures together to do one thing and push in only one direction. Because that's not what complex systems do. They don't have this kind of paper pushing, like the climate and the ecosystems and the biodiversity and all of the different parts of the world. They're not sending each other memos or passing regulation or laws to adjust their behavior. It's organic in nature. Now, I'm not saying that states, the UN, IMF, and all these are bad. Again, I'm saying that they were useful for a certain period of humanity's growth and development in order to grow our consciousness to the level where we are capable of displaying or shifting to systems that allow for complex behaviors or complex kind of interactions. Now, one example I'm giving is Boyan Slat's the Great Ocean Cleanup. So it's basically a 16-year-old teenager that decided that there's too much trash in the ocean and decided to start, coordinating and taking it out of there. That is one person that had a great idea. And then it was kind of crowdsourced and crowdfunded and plenty of other people pitched in. It wasn't coordinated by a government. It was coordinated by motivated people. And the capital sort of flowed in. And the results they get in putting these barriers in various rivers to capture trash before it even gets into the ocean is tremendous. It's great. It's amazing. And that's just one initiative in a system that is gridlocked like this with legacy institutions that are just not fit for purpose for where we're going. And imagine that kind of action scaled at the level of humanity, which means that now every other person is another Boyan Slat. That's what we need to reach. And in order to reach that, you also need to think of the systems that allow for that kind of coordination. In your body, you have a circulatory system. You have your lungs, you're breathing oxygen. You have a metabolism, you have like a digestive system. And all of those resources are that allow for your body to move the way that it does, which isn't like robot-like. It's really like very free-flowing and organic. There are systems to support that. And when you were still an organism gestating in your mother's womb, those systems weren't in place yet. They were kind of supported artificially to grow to the moment where they were capable of functioning in this organic fashion. They were artificially kind of held in place in the womb, and also your body was artificially kind of accessing energy from your mother via the umbilical cord and via the placenta. Now, symbolically speaking, as I've said in many videos, these centralized institutions like governments or IMF or whatever are a kind of placenta. And this planet and the third dimension is kind of a planetary womb. To grow humanity, or a humanoid, self-aware kind of species that serves as the bridge between the immaterial world and the material world, because we have the power to materialize ideas. That's basically why we're here. But to do it in a way that is harmonious. And so these institutions, just like the placenta, have a role to play in order to grow the organism to the point where all those systems sort of click into place and allow for all of these parts to display complex behaviors in this kind of decentralized, way where there's no central authority that dictates everything. Is your heart the boss? Is your stomach the boss? Are your lungs the boss that decide, oh, you're going to get oxygen, you're not going to get oxygen, you're fired, you're this or that? No, it's really this kind of decentralized collective intelligence where every single part is intelligent in its own right. And it sort of clicks together in a very, very complex way. And the mix and the combination of all of these organs is what creates this magic, this spark. If you lose your lungs, you're dead. If you lose your heart, you're dead, right? And so the relative theory of money that I discussed in the previous video is one element to that, which allows for this base layer for collective global coordination to scale humanity to the next level. It's more like the oxygen, but that's not the only thing, right? There's not only oxygen. The next step is, let me just make this a little thinner. The next step on this journey is, patents and copyright. So this is kind of a taboo in some circles because, many people are a fan of open source. And I am as well, actually. I really love open source. Besides, if you look at blockchain, which is key to transition to this phase where humanity functions as a global collective organism in a complex, and allows for these complex types of behaviors and coordinations. And it's already happening, obviously, because if you look at the Ethereum ecosystem and everything that's built on top of it, it allows for coordinations to achieve, solutions for plenty of very, very complex and sophisticated problems, but without having a bureaucratic, institution of 10,000 civil servants working full time to solve certain problems. It allows for this kind of fluidity and flexibility in testing things, iterating, and finding very simple mechanisms for what allows for then afterwards very complex coordinations. So open source has a role to play, but you shouldn't underestimate patent and copyright and the necessity to create a system for allowing companies to or incentivize companies to innovate and gather momentum in terms of, how should I say, the importance of what they're doing. So it's just an extension of this logic of when you're running, the energy concentrates in your legs, right? So imagine this company that has this brilliant idea of doing solar panels or whatever. These people dedicate their lives and their research. They study for tens of years to perfect their idea and to get, the kind of to the state of knowledge to be able to think of very complex ideas and solve them. Once that company tries to roll out a product and has this idea, if anyone can just free ride on that idea and tap into it, then it's almost as if parts of your body were confiscating the energy that was flowing to your legs and decided to capture it instead of it. And I'm not saying that we should have a locked-in system where you have patent trolls that hold all the patents and that prevent innovation by sitting on patents for decades without allowing for there to be any progress. I'm saying that as humanity, everything that we've lived through up to this point are key experiences that we should take inspiration from and create systems that sort of integrate all of that wisdom and transcend it by integrating it. And so we have decades, if not centuries, of experience in patent law, in patent, in copyright, in copyright awarding copyrights, or in copyright lawsuits, in copyright abuses, such as with patent trolls, and also in copyright price gouging, for instance, when you're basically making things too expensive. All of that is all the experiences we've been through now can allow us to create decentralized systems for copyright that are much fairer, but that still allow for companies that have a really good idea, that like Boyan Slat, for instance, and his ocean cleanup, that need to scale because everybody thinks it's a good idea. And patents is just, and copyright is just one extra layer above simply giving them money to allow them to scale even faster in terms of the gaining revenue and traction. Meaning, if anybody wants to piggyback on their idea, they just need to give a little bit of something of their revenue to that company because they're the initiators. And so the vision that I have for this is copyrights and patents on the blockchain, quite simply. So, on Ethereum, for instance, with smart contracts, you can now, for instance, have an NFT, which is minted as a copyright. So the system would be this. A company, well, first of all, you need to port existing copyright into the blockchain. And the copyright should be minted as an NFT, but hosted on a decentralized cloud service such as SIA, which I'm really a fan of, via Sia Coin, because it's truly decentralized. Your files get chopped up into like 50 little bits and then get dispersed into encrypted and dispersed across the internet, or people that just rent out parts of their hard drive. And so that's what I call true decentralization with a peer-to-peer kind of system. So imagine people that hold existing copyrights. They download that copyright and they go through a validation system where, for the moment, they would need to be validated by... So you create a... what is it called? A web of trust network of existing copyright professionals. So people that are either like these validating bodies, like the patent office and whatever. Web of trust means that in order to get into the network, you have to be validated by at least 5 people that are already in the network. So all these people that are professionals in copyright, they get into a web of trust kind of system, and they need to validate these initial NFT mintings of the existing copyrights. And so all existing copyrights get converted into NFTs on the blockchain hosted on a decentralized cloud like SIA. Then you have an AI, decentralized AI, probably like SingularityNet, for instance, that is trained on as much possible data available from copyright law, patents. It needs to be trained on all existing patents and copyrights, plus all of the rulings, all of the case law, all of the academic work on this, and it's just trained to be specifically trained on this. After that, you have a new company that has a new copyright or a new idea for a patent. It first submits its idea to the AI, which looks at all the existing copyrights already in the blockchain to see if there isn't any overlap, or if that new idea, is truly original and meets the criteria for being a patented copyright. If the AI says yes, then it goes directly into a pool of validators that are humans, that are in this web of trust, that are professionals in copyright law, that are validated as such, as being professionals. It's kind of like this idea of the guilds in medieval ages, where you need to join a guild, to be, whatever, a blacksmith or a butcher or something. And those validators look at what the AI has said, the AI analysis, look at the patent, and approve it with a stamp. If, for instance, the AI rejects it, then the company can make an appeal to human review. All of this, of course, costs a little bit of, gas or ETH, or whatever you want to call it. Here, we've very low sum kind of gas. It would just account for the calculations, using this AI in terms of calculation costs or whatever, computing costs or something like that, in order to feed the AI to provide that kind of answer. So yeah, it would be very low fee, and here would be a little higher fee. Once the copyright is approved, it goes into this database of NFTs hosted on a decentralized cloud. And like in copyright law, for instance, you have already a lot of different systems for saying after how many years these patents are now part of the how should I say this? Public property. So like they go public after like 70 years or something. And all of these kind of good practices or best practices can be either taken as such, or maybe can be revised based on this grander coordination of society, where society as a whole would have the power to overrule some of these regulations or rules in order to be more fitting for the collective will, to reflect the collective will. Because ultimately 70 years, that's not something that has been just popped out of nowhere, right? This is something that normally has been decided by regulators, which normally reflect the will of the people via the social contract and elections and so forth. It's a very indirect way for people to vote for the kind of rules and regulations that they have to abide by afterwards. But when you move to more decentralized or self-governance systems, then obviously the whole of society doesn't need to decide on the shape of the shrubbery of your neighbors, and your neighbor's garden, right? And that's not the point. But society needs to have a look at the overarching functionings and rules of the mechanisms that allow for the coordination of the collective. And after how many years a patent becomes public property, or is it open source code? I don't know the terminology exactly, but you get what I'm referring to. That should basically be under the scrutiny of these kind of higher bodies, and there should be a back and forth, obviously, between people that are the existing copyright professionals and society, and all these needs to be discussed, debated, and that's totally fine. That takes the time that it needs to take, but upon initiation, these systems need to reflect the best kind of possible, how should I say, consensus of how they're functioning in the best way. And also, each patent should also include in it a royalties information that is also minted on the blockchain. And so, in order to apply for copyright, it could actually be very easy and streamlined and very low cost. And you just need to provide money for minting it as an NFT and for hosting it on the Sia network for like 70 years plus, right? Which would be very low, because it would be a file that would be more like 1 or 2 megabytes, which is nothing. If you look at the price of storage on Sia Coin for like a terabyte for a month, it's a fraction of what it costs on Amazon Cloud. And so I'm sure that for like 10 euros or 20 euros, probably you could host a tiny file for 70 years, no problem. So you include information about royalties. What does that mean? It means that, imagine now a company, an enterprise, a C Corp, let's say, or whatever, that wants to manufacture a certain good. produce a smartphone or whatever. It has to do a detailed kind of overview of what it intends to create or produce. With all the process, it is fed into the AI via strict anonymity and privacy and whatever. So the AI would never like spy on that or try to piggyback on that or feed it to somebody else for competitive advantage, send it to China or Japan or whatever. It would just analyze what you're intending to produce, and then it looks into the pool of patents. And you of course you also feed it your pool of patents, what the patents that you own, and it would look at which patents which patents are concerned or are overlapping with the product that you're selling. Like you might unwittingly, you're producing a product and you're actually using a patent from somebody else, you don't even know it. And so the AI checks that, and then it tells you, it goes back to you and says, so based on all the patents that you're using in order to produce your good, you need to pay this amount of royalty to that company, this amount of royalty to this one, or whatever. And via smart contracts, this can be done super, super easily. If all transactions happen on the blockchain, so meaning each individual here sends money to this C Corp by buying its goods, and that transaction happens on the blockchain, then from that transaction, parts of it can be directly sort of taken as royalties before going into the C Corp. So say that you pay 100 euros for whatever product C Corp is selling, and that C Corp has to pay 3%, 1% of the revenue to each patent. So from that 100 euros, 1 euro is taken for royalty for one patent, 1 euro for another one, and 1 euro for a third one. And you receive 97 euros. That's your total revenue. And 3 euros have been taken instantly. And so what's really practical for this is you don't have to have crazy calculations of, okay, it's only on the profits, and then, you try to manipulate it as a company to make sure that your profits are as tiny as possible and to spend as much money as possible to increase your costs artificially so that because you have tiny little profits margins, then you don't have to pay any taxes and you've optimized your blah, 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 all of that has gone out the window with smart contracts. And you have these that are plugged into each other. You know exactly how much you're going to receive upon each sale and how much is going to go to serve for royalties for other people that have patents that concern your product. And that, by the way, also concerns you as a C Corp or a company. If you have patents that are here, then you're also receiving royalties on top of, receiving the proceeds for your sales. So, and this can be very easily done on top of the relative theory of money system, because that would also be implemented on blockchain. And so whenever somebody buys something from somebody else, there's these smart contracts, check, the transaction for that company, the product, check, the different NFTs and patents that have been recognized as being in link with that, and then immediately transfer the money to those. And so you see that this kind of system, and obviously these Web of Trust people, the people that are the existing professionals that are validating, they receive, there's a monetary incentive for validating. There also needs to be, of course, a mechanism for checking, as you say in Rome, like who watches the watchers. And so a whole kind of system like in oracles, where you have people that at the same time you can also contest a certain patent, and that also goes into this pool. And then all kinds of systems where when they disagree, there has to be an arbitration and the mediators, and all of that, of course, costs money, and that can be paid for via these smart contracts. And it's just about looking at the way that it functions today and thinking of how do you allow for the adding fluidity to this with decentralized systems, and learning from all of what we had with the centralized systems and porting it to the decentralized ones. So that was for patents. And the next point I'm going to discuss is maybe auto payments, because that ties in nicely with what I was discussing with patents. So one thing to realize is that with these patents and copyright in decentralized form, there isn't this thing where you're waiting as a company for 2 years that, you've being paid your royalties, and then these artificial blockages for the natural flow of energy or money. You're paid instantly. The moment that a company makes a sale of their product, they receive whatever is for them, and whoever else is involved in terms of their patents, they are paid instantly as well, every time there's a sale. And so, automatic. And so, auto payments, sorry for my handwriting. It's always been terrible, but bear with me. This is just a generalized principle, something to be generalized to the entire economy. If you look at the way that our economy functions, there are many blocks that prevent money from flowing freely, or what's called the velocity of money. Velocity of money. Yeah, and see if I got a reminder to do these videos today, so I'm doing it. For instance, when you work for a company, how often are you paid? Typically, it's once a month. So you receive your salary every end of the month. But your company receives, the proceeds of their sales on a daily basis. Now, sometimes if it's like a big, huge company, then the money has to flow sort of through all of the different branches, and then there's this very complex kind of way of money flowing through the different elements of the corporation, which is really, again, a necessary system to be put in place, but has to be transcended to allow for, again, the emergence of this more complex system coordination at the scale of humanity. And so money doesn't flow freely. It's blocked at certain points. Like, for instance, if you're working as a cashier in a supermarket, you don't get, every time you scan an article and it's being sold, you don't get on your blockchain contract the proceeds of every single sale that's happening in the store in real time, right? You only receive your salary at the end of the month. And with blockchain technology and all this stuff, patents is just one element, but auto payments can be generalized in the entire economy. Meaning, if you're working in a store, for instance, there's 5 people working in a store, right? Well, maybe you won't get your payment in real time every time you scan an article or sell an article. But say after the day's work, so you start at your shift at 9, you end at 6 p.m., and all of the sales that happen between that point and that point are then held in a kind of smart contract or calculated, and at the end of the day, all 5 receive a certain percentage of the total sales, which has been agreed in their working contract from the moment they're hired. And if there's a manager, then it has a tiny little higher percentage, the manager would be paid 1.2% of all sales, and the people working there, the 4 others, would receive 0.9% of all the sales of the day. Instantly paid to their wallets. And now you're starting to imagine how the economy would actually function. The kind of 9 to 5 job where you have a fixed working contract as an employee would no longer be the norm. What you would have is these micro tasks, platforms like Upwork or whatever, where people would receive micro payments from everywhere all the time. Imagine you are at the same time you're a composer and you compose music and you put it there, you put it out there on the blockchain, and it, kind of like Spotify but decentralized. Every time somebody listens, you receive a tiny micro payment instantly. You're also an author. You write some books, so every time somebody buys your book, you're paid instantly. You are also someone that gives teaching lessons for music, and every time a student, of course, that's already happening in real life, but and you get paid. or you're hired by a company they put out on the blockchain, and that's going to be a topic that I'm going to discuss now as well because it's tied to this. It's the idea of microtasking and dynamic salaries. So, in essence, companies would use AI to do hiring, or also these kinds of, this kind of Upwork kind of platforms, the platform economy for work. Well, they will use decentralized platforms for that so that you don't have this middleman. And they would use AI to identify the kind of jobs or tasks that are needed, package them into a task that needs to be carried out, put it out on the blockchain for people to postulate and apply. And then the dynamic salary part is very interesting, is you have a sort of a deadline that is set for the task. So you need the task to be done by say a week. And you publish it, say, so there's a deadline for that. And you publish the task that needs to be done, say 2 weeks here, 2 weeks before. And so as time goes by, the amount of salary that you'll be paid goes up gradually as you go towards the deadline. And so your employer, basically, what they do is they say, I'm ready to pay between 10 euros and 100 euros for this task. And as time is ticking and you get closer to the deadline, the amount that you get paid rises. Now, why is this interesting? Because our current system functions on the basis of wage slaves. So because people are locked into paying mortgages, paying rent, paying all kinds of bills, they need to find a job. It's not like they can say, I'm going to wait for the perfect opportunity to show up because I can wait, I can afford to wait for a certain amount of time and not sell myself cheap because I'm constrained by all of the necessities of life, by the fact that I have a bill to pay, or otherwise somebody's going to come and evict me from my house and whatever. And that creates a system that pushes wages lower because people are ready to work for less just in order to maintain a certain sanity in terms of their lives, because it's not enjoyable to have people knock at your house to take back your car or your property because you haven't paid your bills for a certain amount of time. Now, I'm not advocating for a nanny state communism thing where everybody can just receive $3,000 of helicopter money and not work anymore. If you look at what the real relative theory of money proposes, if you spread evenly the amount of money that you kind of is produced every year, then it would account to about $300 or $400 per person, which barely allows you to eat, but it allows you to eat. So you could eat basically and live on the street for $400, but it's not like you can live in a condo with a jacuzzi and pay for everything and be like this, and twiddle your thumbs. But it's not also as if you can go die under a bridge and society doesn't care. So it's this minimum kind of solidarity mechanism, just like oxygen. So the oxygen that you breathe in and out of your body, it feeds every single cell, but it's not sufficient for the cells to function. They also need access to vitamins, minerals, proteins, and all kinds of other things, elements. And so the relative theory of money is just this base layer which allows for people just to basically signal their what is important to them every day in terms of what is their priority, what today is important to them. Like, they receive this universal dividend, what am I going to spend on? What am I going to spend it on? And that should reflect what you believe is important at that point in time. Maybe today what's important is to clean up the oceans. Maybe today it's important to go to McDonald's. I don't know. And that's for each person to decide. And that's how you get this emergence of a complex, a system out of humanity. And so with this system of dynamic salaries, it allows for people to, basically what the effect is the jobs that nobody wants to do are the ones that are paid highest. That is, if you want, for instance, I don't know, just to give an example, you have like a ton of garbage as a company that has accumulated over time and nobody wants to take it out, so you just issue this microtask and you say, this garbage needs to be gone and I'll pay between 10 and 100 euros, and whoever claims this contract and does the task will get, whenever you claim it and you do it, is the amount of money that you get paid as you get closer to the deadline. And what's nice is, if you really enjoy something, you love to do something, you're going to jump on this contract immediately. And there's no problem with that, because probably it's something that you would have done regardless, and you're just happy to be paid on top. So ideally, that's how society should function, is like people do what they really, really love and enjoy. And if they get paid on top of that, well, great, that's a bonus. And for the tasks that people hate to do, absolutely hate it, it should be paid a lot of money to compensate you for the fact that that kind of reticence of doing it. And what's nice with this system as well is that, where do you think that automation will focus? Right now, automation is always focused on what costs the most in society. Do burger flippers cost a lot in terms of the money that you need to spend for burger flippers? They're minimum wage. They're like $10, $12, $14 or something an hour. But automation concerns all of the things that are most costly. So if you look at where AI, many studies are looking at what jobs will AI displace. It's the highest paying jobs. It's like very, very smart lawyers that are specialized in this one very specific thing, that with all the accumulated knowledge that they've written and put into papers all over the place, if you pool all of that and feed it to an AI, then you can maybe get rid of or lower the cost of those people, because now you're not dependent on their expertise. Now you can use AI to sort of weed out, sort out plenty of different things, and then only call them for marginal little tasks, because that's what your company's costs. That's where they're the highest, and that's what you want to eliminate first. With this kind of system, with dynamic salaries and these kind of microtasking, well, you will have a better picture of what people actually enjoy doing, and then therefore costs less for your company, and what people hate doing, and what costs most. What costs most. And then obviously your natural reflex is to invest the most amount of money in automation on tasks that every single human hates doing, and not the tasks that you can get away with paying very little to people, because they are in that kind of society where they don't have the luxury of saying, oh, I don't like flipping burgers, but I'm going to do it anyway because I have to make a living, and that's just, how it is. And I'm not saying that everybody hates flipping burgers. That's not what I'm saying. If some people love it, that's absolutely great, and I have no problem with that. But with this system, you'll get a better overview at a societal level of what people enjoy doing, what people hate doing. And that's where you have to focus your effort. And that's how you kind of get this kind of, again, the goal with all of the systems and the ideas that I'm pushing here is to reach a point where we can where humanity at scale as a planet can function in a complex way, in a very spontaneous dynamic, where we have this kind of collective decentralized intelligence that emerges, and that you cannot pinpoint or capture, just like in your brain. If you try to micromanage, if you try to understand these crazy neural connections and patterns in your brain, it's super, super, super sophisticated. And it makes sense from our higher perspective as humans. But imagine for one of your cells starts to try to understand how your brain functions. It's ridiculous, completely ridiculous. You can't, right? Just like no human will ever be able to capture the total emergence the total intelligence that emerges from a collective of 10 billion people that interact via these complex systems. And that's totally fine. That's the way it should be, actually. If you can understand how, if one single human can reverse engineer and understand and manipulate how all of these systems function, then we will have failed at creating this kind of global collective decentralized intelligence. I mean, it should remain something almost mysterious that transcends us. Just like, the results of your neurons firing amount to you taking action with your body, and that action cannot be understandable by a single cell. So for instance, when you're thirsty as an organism, you feel like you're thirsty, you're going to go downstairs to get water at the water fountain. That action translates into billions of bioelectric data streams into every single body part to manifest the action of going out the door, going down the stairs, and going to the water fountain. And so you achieve the end result, but via plenty of different bodily states, changes in your bodily states that your cells don't understand. They can't comprehend. Like, why do I have to move my legs like this to get water? What's the link? What's the logical link between I have the command, something is commanding me to move or do these kinds of things. I'm just thirsty. Give me water now. But you as a human, you understand that is a prerequisite for getting the water later, which for a single-celled organism that is swimming in a swamp doesn't have that. There is no lag between there's no symbolic interface or intermediary between its direct needs and its external environment, or very little. Like it will just directly seek whatever it is after via these very direct kind of information. So for instance, it has certain sensors to sense like mycelia, mycelia to detect where there's more sugar or where there are more nutrients based on, the direct environment that it's in contact with. But to resolve problem-solving skills at the scale of humanity, like for instance, opening a door, going downstairs and going to a water fountain, that is not accessible to mycelia. It can solve plenty of different problems super intelligently, but not these kinds of higher order problems. Like it cannot, if you lock it in a petri dish, it can't sort of start thinking about, okay, this is glass. What if I put all my weight on one side of the glass and try to shift it in order to move the petri dish on the side of this table, and so the petri dish will fall on the ground and the glass will break and then I'll be free and then no, it can't. Right? You've put it in that self-imposed environment and it doesn't have the necessary cognitive abilities to do that. And so all of these systems that I'm presenting here have only one single aim. It is to create this kind of decentralized collective global intelligence. And obviously, I'm not saying that microtasking now has to be the norm. I'm sure that there will be part-time employment and full employment still for a certain number of people, and that'll be totally fine. But I expect auto payments to become a norm, which means you won't have to wait at the end of the month to get your pay, which allows for money to circulate much quicker in an economy, and which prevents all kinds of friction and these blocking kind of mechanisms for the economy to move and fluctuate organically. You understand that if as an employee you're paid 0.9% at the end of the day, if your company has made less sales or no sales, then your salary is going to be naturally lower. Now, is that a bad thing per se? And that's a very important point. As humans, we've grown accustomed to the fact that every month, at the end of the month, you receive the exact same salary. But this is a kind of artificial transformation of humans into automatons or robots that have to have the same needs, the same consumption patterns year long, regardless of what happens in your life. And that's completely crap. Because that's not how our bodies function. That's not how nature functions. And if you look at even the 4 seasons, you have periods where you have a shoot up in consumption, then it levels off, then it goes down, and then there's winter. And so even our bodies are cyclical. Even as throughout your lifetime as a human, you understand that when you're a child, you need almost no money because your parents care for everything. Then you need a little bit more money. Then when you're between 30 and 40 and you have a family, you need suddenly a lot of money. Then your kids go to college, you need even more money. Then you need a little less money. And there have been phases within that where in a certain year, you needed a lot of money and then you needed very little money. And there's just the only mechanism we've created to try to fill those gaps is debt. So when you need a lot of money at a certain point in time, you need to take out a lot of debt. And then when you need less, then you're repaying the debt. And you can still kind of leverage that kind of tool, but with these automatic payments and these microtasking and the fact that you're constantly receiving this influx of funds allows the economy to fluctuate much more organically. And so at a time where there may be no need for your product, basically because of the debt-based monetary system, every single company has to find ways to sell you more crap every year, because if it doesn't grow, it dies. It's just point blank. So if you don't manage, well, not necessarily sell more things, but at least has a growth in revenue. And growth in revenue in nature, if you look at any kind of graph that maps out energy consumption or growth over time, it is an exponential in the first phase, every time. Like if you look at the trees, if you look at plants, if you look at all kinds of organisms, even our own bodies, it's exponential and then kind of levels off. And then it kind of can fluctuate a little bit like this. And we've mastered this phase, which is, from startup to the moment where you become a sort of established company and you have, 10 branches or something, and you're international. But we haven't mastered this. For the moment, we want it to go like this. But that just never happens in nature. It never happens. And for the moment, most economists or post-growth economists are talking about reaching this, but what they want to do is this, which that's not going to happen either, because you don't see that in nature either. Like trees don't grow to their full size and then just go, oh, I'm consuming too many resources now, I'm going to be a tiny little shrubbery again. That just doesn't happen. But there is a kind of a stability phase where you stabilize as a fully grown kind of organism, and then you fluctuate more or less with seasons, with all kinds of things. And even in here, you still have cycles, but it's still an exponential. Like for instance, when you have a sapling or whatever, in winter, it doesn't grow at the same rate as it's in spring, but it reaches a point where in spring, it doesn't grow at the same rate anymore. And there's this fluctuation that is more kind of flat. And so with this system that I'm proposing, it allows for that organic fluctuation, because now you understand as a human that, when there are a lot of sales, you get a lot of money, and that allows the economy to be more, the money to circulate faster in the economy, and for you to have more goods and services and whatever. And so, and when there is less circulation, when there's less sales, then everything sort of contracts naturally as well. You don't need to fire people because their salary is adjusted automatically. And so everything kind of can adjust like this seamlessly with this kind of system. And I'm going to finish on this. The next point that I'm going to talk about is generalized shareholders. Because right now you have, on the one hand, the shareholder class, and on the one hand, the working class. And those two actually need to be combined to be one and the same. Meaning, you're not just an employee of your company, you're also a shareholder of your company. And so you receive not only your salary, but you also receive the dividends from the profits that your company makes. And you can be a shareholder of your competitor, which is a very good thing. Like, I would imagine that, I'm just going to touch that on the next video, but imagine if you're working at Nike and you get your salary from Nike, but you also own shares from Adidas, from Umbro, from all kinds of other sporting companies, so that when they're doing well, you're doing well as well. But if your company is doing well, then you get more salary, and so that's good for you as well. And so in that sense, it's more a kind of resilient system where you're not trying to sink your competitor, and it's more a competition on let's be the best, but not at the, how can I put this? You're not trying to kill your opponent, basically. But, I'll get into this in the next video because this is already an hour long. And so we'll discuss journalized shareholders. And I hope you found this video interesting with dynamic salaries, automatic payments, smart contracts, and the way that, it could function in the future. And don't hesitate to leave a comment, like, share, subscribe, and talk to you in the next video. Bye, guys.